What's up? Back at you with another video. Today we're looking at Rob Hersov, and thereafter we'll be looking at a video that demonstrates to us the state that the United States is in. Whenever I watch US content, I love to watch quite a lot of business. So Bloomberg Tech in the morning with Caroline Hyde and Ed Ladlow. I'm always watching Bloomberg Tech. I'm reading the information. I'm reading the New York Times. I'm reading MSNBC. I'm reading and watching Fox News. I read the Wall Street Journal. I am paying for the Financial Times. I have a subscription. I listen to podcasts such as Capital Allocators. It's a podcast for venture capitalists. And so I have my daily diet of global news, especially American tech and business. I understand the presidency right now, like from the seat of my pants. I can feel it. You know, there's that thing, Barry. You're flying the plane with the seat of your pants, whatever. That means without instruments, you can really feel what is actually happening. Or without reliance on instruments, you are able to feel it like it's the back of your hand, man, what is currently happening. So when I listen, though, to Rob Hersov and the Ronaldo hosts, I find myself quite often wondering, why does the American state over there look so scary when I listen to it from the point of view of these men over here? Trump is not that hard. The US is not so supreme. But first, 3 minutes, 57 seconds. Let's just hear what Rob Hersov has to say, and then we'll just let the news speak for themselves. I ain't trying to debate. I just want you to hear what I'm hearing. Here's Rob.
South Africa's on America's radar, and the ANC deserves every bit of what's coming, as does EFF and MK. The free ride is over. Trump just put South Africa on notice, and it's about time. This country isn't a victim of history. It's a victim of the ANC. Here are some facts. On the 17th of March, 2025, Trump stated South Africa is a place where the human rights of people have been strenuously questioned. And on the 7th of February, 2025, Trump signed an order titled Addressing Egregious Actions of the Republic of South Africa. We have an unemployment crisis. Over 42% of South Africans are unemployed. And we have a crime epidemic. South Africa has one of the highest violent crime rates in the world. 84 murders a day that we know about. Our infrastructures are falling apart. We are rolling blackouts with Eskom back to implementing stage 2 to stage 6 load shedding. I mean, is this ever going to end? And the ANC is being silent. Why? Because their lies and excuses aren't working anymore. Who can they blame? They try blaming whiteness, colonialism, apartheid. Just understand, they need to blame themselves. And there's global hypocrisy. South Africa aligns with authoritarian regimes, yet tries to demand preferential Western trade deals. And the truth behind the numbers? This isn't a slip-up. It's 30 years of socialist misrule, corruption, anti-white racism, and complete incompetence. Basically, the ANC playbook. The ANC governs like it's entitled to power, while the country falls apart beneath us. South Africa is treated like a miracle democracy by useful idiots like the European Union and leftists generally, because it suits global elites to keep the post-apartheid fairy tale alive. Madiba would be disgusted about the ANC and where it is today. There's nothing miraculous about economic collapse, criminal governance, and state decay. The West has been cowardly and complicit, refusing to call out this ideological disaster in real terms. Why is the ANC allowed to fail without consequence? Why is it allowed to destroy South Africa without consequence? Why is the international community enabled South Africa's downfall? And when does the rest of the world copy America and say enough is enough? South Africa isn't just losing credibility, it's losing the moral high ground it never earned in the first place. And this isn't about Trump, this is about truth, common sense, finally catching up with corrupt power. So here's a path forward. We hold the ANC accountable. We, South Africans, no more using ANC struggle credentials as a shield. That was too long ago. It's over. We need to embrace free markets, real leadership, and policies that work, not Marxist rhetoric. If South Africa stays on this disastrous ANC path, we will become another failed state. In fact, we'll be one of the few states that has gone backwards, deindustrialized, and collapsed.
Wow.
So we need to choose reform, and South Africa can become the economic powerhouse it was always meant to be. South Africa does not need pity. It needs radical change. We need the ANC out and South Africa first.
Let's quickly jump into... We're going to be listening to about 8 minutes of Jeffrey Sachs. So, if you're wondering who is Jeffrey Sachs, then this is Jeffrey Sachs. We ask Perplexity.ai. Who is Jeffrey Sachs and what is the issue between him and Trump regarding tariffs? There you go. Jeffrey Sachs is a prominent American economist and a public policy analyst, currently a professor at Columbia University and a director of the Center of Sustainable Development. He is known for his work on sustainable development, economic development, and his advisory roles at the United Nations, particularly on the Millennium Development Goals and Sustainable Development Goals. Sachs has authored several influential books and is recognized for his contributions to global poverty reduction and public policy. Former President Donald Trump recently introduced a new wave of reciprocal tariffs, including a 10% minimum baseline tariffs on all imports, with higher rates for certain countries. These tariffs are part of a broader protectionist trade agenda, which Trump claims are necessary to address the U.S. trade deficit and protect American jobs. Jeffrey Sachs has been an outspoken critic of Trump's tariff policies, describing them as economically misguided and damaging both to the United States and the global economy. Sachs has labeled Trump's approach as Mickey Mouse economics and argued that Trump's understanding of trade is fundamentally flawed, so much so that Sachs said he wouldn't even pass an introductory economics course. Here are the key points of disagreement. Sachs contends that the US trade deficit is not caused by unfair trade practices abroad, but by excessive government spending that exceeds national income. He likens the US situation to running up credit card debt and then blaming the stores for selling goods, emphasizing that the real issue is domestic fiscal policy, not foreign trade partners. Economic impact of tariffs. Sachs warns that Trump's tariffs will lower the standard of living in the United States by raising prices and stagnating incomes. He argues that protectionism will ultimately isolate the US economy and politically, as other countries will redirect trade among themselves, leaving the US at a disadvantage. Global consequences. Sachs blames Trump's trade policies for causing turmoil in global markets, estimating a $10 trillion loss in global wealth due to these measures. He also criticizes the imposition of high tariffs on smaller economies such as Lesotho, calling the rationale behind such actions delusional. Political and economic isolation. Sachs asserts that few countries, even in Europe, will accept Trump's protectionist approach and that such policies risk isolating the US from the global economy. In conclusion, Jeffrey Sachs and Donald Trump are at odds over the rationale and impact of US tariff policy. Sachs views Trump's tariffs as economically unsound, harmful to both the US and the world, and based on a misunderstanding of basic economic principles. He advocates for open trade and fiscal responsibility, while Trump continues to promote tariffs as a tool to correct trade imbalances and protect American interests. So here is Sachs himself in an interview. We're going to be listening to him for about 8 minutes, 9 minutes.
If you take your credit card and you go shopping and you run up a large credit card debt, you're running a trade deficit with all those shops. Now, it would be pretty strange if you then blamed all the shop owners for having sold you all those things. You're ripping me off, you're ripping me off, you're ripping me off, I'm running a trade deficit. That is the level of understanding of the President of the United States. The trade deficit does not represent at all trade policies. It represents spending relative to production or earnings. We call that an identity. I teach it in the second day of my course in international monetary economics. Trump never made it to the second day. So he says, you're running a trade deficit. Look, they're all cheating me. But all that's happening is the United States is outspending its national income. And you can look at the national income chart. You can add up consumption and investment and government spending, and you can subtract off gross national product. And lo and behold, what will that equal? Not approximately, exactly. That will equal the current account deficit, which is the comprehensive measure of how much you spend on goods and services versus how much you sell in goods and services. So the United States runs a current account deficit because it spends more than it produces. Why does it do that? We have a big credit card in the United States.
Yeah.
It's called the national government. The U.S. government spends about $2 trillion a year more than it takes in revenues. What it's doing is making transfers to the American people and to American businesses. It doesn't tax Americans for those transfers because, here's another little fact, because the congressmen that vote on the budget got into office by being paid for their campaigns by rich people who don't like taxes. So the political system says spend, but don't tax us. So we run a chronic deficit in the United States. That spending goes out either as transfer payments or goods and services, and that's more than our national income, which is about $30 trillion, and our spending is about $31 trillion. And that's our trade deficit. And for that, Donald Trump blames the world. Okay, I fail him for this if he were my student. He's my president. It's a little weirder because when he did this, in 2 days, the world lost $10 trillion of market capitalization. By the way, where did it go? Did it get transferred from here to here? No. It got destroyed. Why destroyed? Because trade, something also the President of the United States doesn't understand, is mutually beneficial. So if you stop trade, everybody loses. It's not that one side wins, the other side loses. He cannot understand that concept as a guy that traded real estate in New York. So his idea is somebody had to win, somebody had to lose. But what happened when he made this announcement was $10 trillion was wiped out worldwide. It's not that the U.S. went up and they went down. No, everybody went down. Because the whole world system is based on a division of labor, and he's breaking that division of labor into pieces. So then people said, this doesn't make sense. Even the very rich people that gave him the money for him to get into office started saying this doesn't make sense. The hedge fund managers who were his big campaign contributors, Elon Musk, who paid for his election, became prime minister, he said this doesn't make sense. And then the markets said this doesn't make sense. Not only $10 trillion, but as the finance minister said, interest rates started to rise because people began to dump U.S. Treasury debt.
The safest thing in the world, apparently.
So interesting what happened. It's not quite true that he reversed things. First, he left on this 10% tariff, except for one country, for China.
145%
where he raised the tariff rates. That's because the United States has a deep, neurotic attachment to China. The U.S. political system hates China. Why? Because China's big and successful. And so that the U.S. hates. It's a rival, it's a competitor. And so this is the one thing he left on. Now he's going to mess up everything with this too, because in a trade war between the U.S. and China, China wins. China does not depend on the U.S. market very much. It's about 12% of China's exports. China will do just fine. It's just dumb policy. There's no more, sorry to say it, there's just no more explanation to this than that. It makes no sense. Now, it raises, if I could, just one last point. How can this happen when it makes no sense? And that, people should understand, we are in one-person rule in the United States. Our political system is in a state of collapse. What President Trump did is an emergency decree. Everything he does is an emergency decree, literally. You can go on to whitehouse.gov and then follow the menu to executive decrees. And there are dozens of them. And each one starts the same way. With the powers invested in me as President of the United States, I hereby declare A, nonsense, B, nonsense, C, nonsense, because he's king. Those powers are not invested in the President of the United States. They're invested in the Congress. You read Article 1, Section 8 of our Constitution. It says that all duties originate with the Congress. And specifically in the lower house, all legislation has to start in the House of Representatives. But the U.S., starting in 1945 after World War II, became a military state to a large extent. And so it sprinkled in its legislation emergency, emergency, emergency. And Trump doesn't have to prove anything's an emergency, he just has to say something's an emergency. So suddenly the trade deficit became an emergency, and on that basis he issues a one-person rule. Even his aides don't know what he's doing. You raise one final interesting issue, which is that the market recovered about $4 trillion when he reversed. Anyone who knew that 5 minutes before made billions.
Insider trading.
This is not the cleanest government in the world, I can tell you.
Yeah.
I'd be hugely surprised if some people didn't know just a bit ahead of time.
And the Trump administration, Trump himself, is looking at the ANC.
Starting with members of the U.S. Congress, by the way.
Look, we'll get into the more general issues about protectionism and the end of globalization question mark in a minute, but I think what's happening and the directives coming from the White House is such a perfect example of what this panel is about. I'd just like to stay on this just for a few more minutes. Minister, is protectionism always a short-term aim, and does it always come at the expense of the longer-term gain? Donald Trump hasn't said it in public, but apparently in private, during his first term, he was asked about the problem of the US national debt, and his answer was, I don't care because I'll be dead by the time it's a problem, and apparently that's also his approach to the climate crisis. So is this protectionism coming from the White House a short-term fix which is going to hurt America in the longer term in terms of how it grows?
It's not.
Okay, I'd say go and watch the video to check out what he has to say. I think that's enough so far. You're listening, you're hearing. Hear for yourself, understand what is happening in the United States, and rest easy at night if you are a South African. You understand? We can, we will, and we must fix our own issues. We must root out those who are corrupt in our government, and we will take care of these matters internally, properly, in a civil, organized way to the best of our ability. We certainly aren't going to do this with the boogeyman, Trump, looking at us from binoculars from across the waters as if he's not on shaky ground and we are not standing on our shores with binoculars looking at his situation. So, like, comment, share, subscribe, and I will be seeing you in the next video. I hope you've appreciated this one.